as promised, although a little bit later than I was previously planning to put this video up, the long range forecast is on the way here. Not gonna really delay this one. I'm going right into it here. So I kind of went over the short term just a little bit in the weekend forecast in yesterday's video. If you want to see that video, the link will be in the top right corner here. But no real severe weather to talk about here. Really not a lot of snow to even talk about, to be honest. But there is one thing to note here, and it's this little area right here that's over towards the Baja. It's this little flow of moisture here. This will be working its way in and around the southeastern parts of the U.S., and it'll create multiple days of showers and thunderstorms over the same areas over and over. And there's no you don't have to be a meteorologist or rocket scientist to figure out that you have showers and thunderstorms flowing over the same areas over and over again. The risk for flooding starts to exist. So this area right here around the Tennessee, the Ozarks, and the Ohio Valley, over towards the Appalachians too, this will become an area of concern. So without further ado, we'll go into that. But one other thing I'm going to bring up real quick is we'll look through the day 4 through 8 category, and we do end up getting some potential for maybe some severe weather towards the middle and end of the week. Once we get to day 5 here, it changes from potential too low to predictability too low. There are a few storm systems down the pipe that look like they have some potential for severe weather, albeit I'd say it's relatively limited, and there's a little bit of disparity between models. So we'll start out with the Euro here. We're looking at one of my favorite maps here, the vorticity map. This really shows a lot of what's going on in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which is a huge part behind storm system development here. So here is our current storm system heading out here, bringing rain to the northeast, but not much more than that. Most of the cold air that you would need for snow is north of the border, so nothing to really worry about there. So here comes these small pieces of energy here from the Baja that I've been talking about. This is what's going to bring our rain potential, severe weather threat into those areas here. And it's when we get to about 60 hours out, that's when our next storm system starts to come into the picture here. Not a very robust looking storm. This also looks like it's relatively warm, a relatively warm core system. So there's not a lot of snow potential with this either, but this does seem to bring in a little bit extra moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and even some from the Pacific. As a result, the rainfall threat increases around this region, mid to late in the week especially. Then towards the 8th and into the 9th, the storm system looks a little bit more organized, so we may see an increased potential for severe weather. I do think this will be isolated, however. We'll see how this progresses here. But it's not a super organized, super robust storm system, so we'll have to watch and see how this progresses here. I don't expect anything major out of it as of right now. But here's an interesting thing that this system does. It kind of stalls out a little bit over here around the northeast. It's a little bit too warm here to be worried about lake effect snow. I'm thinking mostly rain for this entire region here. But while this happens, we see our next storm system come in, and this is what's going, and this will end up ejecting this system out. And I'm about to say those two words that are often really concerning if you're in the weather community. This has the look of a trough ejection. I'm not going to go ahead and say that it is that just yet, but it's looking a little bit like one. So we'll have to watch and see what this does here. And there's a decent little warm sector that's developed around Texas here. So we'll have to watch. I'm going to be watching this area because there could be some increased severe weather potential around the 10th. And really the 11th too. And it's eerie because this is going to be around a area that is very familiar with severe weather around this particular time frame. So I'm a little concerned about that. Definitely don't want to be reliving those unpleasant memories for these guys over here. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen on the news 1 year ago today 1 year ago to that day what happened. fact, keep your eye on the channel. There might be something that talks a little bit about that as well. So move this along here. This definitely has a look of at least a line of thunderstorms. Maybe on the 10th there could be some potential for maybe some tornadoes. I don't think so as of right now, but we are getting into no man's land on this model run here, so we'll have to see how things progress with this. A lot can change with this. This probably will look a little bit different from what we're seeing right now. We'll move this along here. This looks like it also brings in a lot of cold air behind it. So up towards the northern parts of the Ohio Valley, towards Michigan, the Great Lakes, could be a pretty big snow event here, possibly as it stands right now. So we'll watch this move out. This drags in a decent amount of cold air behind it and cools people off around the eastern half of the country, as it looks like we start to dip into a more positive P&A type setup where it's warm in the west and cooler in the east. Again, this is about 10 days out, so we're definitely in no man's land here. We'll go ahead and compare this to the GFS, which does look a bit different. So we'll move this along here, and for the most part it starts out pretty similar. Although, whenever we get this system that forms up around the 8th, it's a little bit stronger, not by much. Also, keep in mind I'm looking at the 12Z Euro because the 18Z only goes up to 90 hours. So that, looking into the long range, that run is relatively useless for me right now, unfortunately. Nothing against the Euro, but the 6 and 18Z run, 06 and 18Z runs are a little bit harder to work with sometimes, not gonna lie. But one unique difference between the Euro and the GFS right now is the fact that we have a little bit of a cutoff low that tries to form here, or it tries to become cut off, or closed, I should say. And what this ends up doing is it kind of lingers here. It still doesn't really draw in a lot of cold air, just like in the Euro run. So I'm not really worried about any sort of snow threat from this. But this does make that rain linger just a little bit more around the northeast and may increase some concern for a flood threat. Now, one thing I also will note about the GFS is that this looks like it's a little bit further behind. As in, this storm system's timing looks like it's going to be a little bit later. But I also want to note that this has a little bit more of a zonal flow, basically meaning that the amplitude of this trough here is a little bit more leveled. It's not a huge, spike or dip in the trough as what you would see in what we were seeing in the Euro. In fact, I'll actually try to go back to it. Here it is. So here's a key difference here. The Euro looks a little bit more progressive. This is going to move quicker. So this is going to definitely look like more of a damaging wind threat a little further out ahead, whereas this one, you might be able to get a few discrete thunderstorms to develop here, and they could be supercells even, depending on how far north that warm sector ends up getting. But anywhere from here to here is where I would be concerned for a severe weather threat should this come to fruition. We'll move that along here. Still drags in a good bit of cold air, not quite as much as the not quite as much cold air as the Euro brings in, but still a sufficient amount of cold air. Maybe even a little bit of snow could be possible towards the interior northeast, maybe even towards the mid-Atlantic. But this storm system will not become a nor'easter, as this storm will be kicked out to sea by the trough here. And then our next system will come in, become closed off, maybe even a cutoff low from the looks of it here, because it's not really going by the same flow as what's going on up here. So we'll have to watch this extremely closely. These are going to be very hard to forecast because they go against the traditional airflow in the jet stream. Move this along. It looks like this could drag a lot of rain, maybe even some snow towards some areas that we aren't used to seeing rain and snow at. But this could also end up dragging in some severe weather. This also looks like a very warm core system, though. So toward the tail end of it, a lot more cold air starts to come in. This could become a big rain snow event potentially towards the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley. And once we get towards the end of the model run here, this looks like it's going to progress its way to the northeast. Of course, at this point, especially with the GFS going out as far as it does, this is going to be pretty tough to forecast because we're over 300 hours out. Definitely in no man's land, no question about that. But those are some of the key differences between the GFS and the Euro at this time. Let's go ahead and look at how the preset models compare to one another on here. So I'll have to reload this page because it's not working properly right now. Should be good though. Yep. All right. You always kind of have to, well, with my computer at least, you always have to hold your breath here and hope that this stuff works half the time. That's what happens when you have a 10-year-old computer. Help me. But anyway, pretty similar look on the preset preset models compared to the vorticity here. With no really robust storm systems and small pieces of energy, showers and thunderstorms going to be the main thing around the southeast. Not too much going on in the way of winter weather either as of right now. Again, it's not really until the 8th where we start to see something more notable. There's a little bit of winter weather that starts to form up here. Mainly, this is going to be a big shield of rain that comes with this little low pressure here. Mainly going to bring in some flash flooding. Not a robust low pressure either. For the most part, there's not really enough moisture to really meet up with this cold air here and make for a much bigger snow shield. So snow here is going to be relatively light and relatively fast moving. It's not really until we get towards the 10th where things look a little bit interesting, mainly towards the northeast. And even so, this storm system will be moving through so quickly to where the potential for a big snow event is just not there. Then, of course, that storm system will be getting kicked out by this storm system. This will be what I'm considering to be our trough ejection. And then, of course, here's our severe weather threat, or severe weather potential on the 10th, I should say. By the 11th, this forms into a big line of storms. I would expect damaging winds possibly with this, depending on how things trend. But right behind this, here comes our cold air, leading into the following week, which should be pretty chilly. And then beyond that, we'll be waiting on our next storm system to arrive, which will be coming into the picture here around the middle of the month. Let's compare that to the GFS here. And we are going to end up seeing something a little bit different. We'll run this in loop mode since I'm more confident in tropical tidbits working on my computer versus a pivotal weather, unfortunately. So move this along. It's not much of a snow shield to work with there. This storm system doesn't really have the same severe weather potential that's shown on the Euro. Of course, that's 12Z Euro, so we'll have to see how the 00Z Euro looks. And then this is an interesting look right here once we get to about 300 hours out. Pretty bold look too, though. But does look like we get some cold air starting to feed in here towards the middle of the month with this storm system. Looks like there's even a little bit of warm air aloft where we could get some snow and ice over towards Oklahoma and Texas. And it's interesting because normally you would see that more towards this region here, but they're getting nothing. So there's a low pressure that pops up around here and drags in a lot of moisture, is able to wind up enough cold air according to this model and end up bringing snow to these regions. The track of this system will be the key to a lot of things. How much cold air will come in, that will also be the key to a lot of things. But this has definitely has an interesting look to it. Move this along, and here's our upper level low here. This looks like it might have a little bit of severe weather potential in its own right. This could be our next named winter storm possibly as well, if this trend continues. But just as quickly as it forms a big snow shield, it goes away, then comes back. We end up going back and forth with this, and we'll have to see what happens as this goes towards the northern tier of the U.S. and heading towards the Great Lakes. And then by the end of the model run, we're staring this down possibly in the northeast. A lot to cover there, but that's the end of this video here. If you enjoyed it, definitely drop me a like. I appreciate it. Um, also, let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Are you enjoying the quiet weather in particular? Do you prefer more active weather? And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. Still over 70% of the people that watch my videos aren't even subscribed to it. So if you're a regular viewer, why not? I mean, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not even asking for money. I just enjoy doing this. But anyway, this has been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the next video. You guys have a good night.